Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Pro Football Historian channel. I'm your host, Flynn Gibbon. Let's start with the Saturday games. Obviously, we had the Chiefs and Broncos. Uh, for the most part, the Broncos controlled those games. Uh, really, the turning point was the Melvin Gordon fumble that was called by Melvin Ingram at the 9 yard line. That was returned for a touchdown by Nick Bolton. So once that happened, Denver went down. They decided to kick a field goal, which I know a lot of people would probably disagree with. I'm kind of okay with the call. Obviously, it didn't turn out well because they didn't stop the Chiefs and didn't get the ball back. So ultimately, Chiefs come out the victory. They would eventually be seeded as the number 2 team, which they'll play Pittsburgh Sunday night coming up this week. Denver, obviously, they fired their coach. Might talk about a little bit more later in the video. Uh, Moving on, Dallas and Eagles. Not a lot you can take from this game. Eagles played a good amount of backups and then even third and fourth stringers later in the game. And Dallas, they played their starters for the most part, not all of them. Mike Parsons obviously didn't play and stuff like that. But it was about, three quarters almost. They played their starters, and then Cooper Rush eventually got the end for the Cowboys at quarterback. Both are in the playoffs. Dallas, will play the San Francisco 49ers as the 3 seed, and the Eagles are the 7 seed playing Tampa Bay. Moving on, we got Pittsburgh and Baltimore. This game was basically who keep their season alive, and they needed a lot of help. Ultimately, Pittsburgh came out on top. Baltimore probably could have, sealed the deal. They didn't have an interception in the end zone. Uh, that really could have put it maybe out of the way. But Ben Roethlisberger, the game was close. They kept it close, and Ben Roethlisberger led the game-winning drive and ultimately won it in overtime. So, Baltimore season ends on a 6-game losing streak. A lot of close games. About 5 of them were really close, under 3 points, I believe. This is one of the most of them were 2 or 1 point. This one was 3. So, other than the Bengals game that they had Josh Johnson, they were in every game. Just couldn't find a way to pull it off. Again, Tyler Huntley played, not Lamar. So Pittsburgh got help, from other games like the Jacksonville game and eventually the Sunday night game, which we'll talk about. Pittsburgh now goes to Kansas City, like I said, and I'm sure they're going to be heavy underdogs. They played a few weeks ago. I'll do a preview video later in the week, probably Friday, discussing all the matchups. Moving on, got the Browns and Bengals. Bengals played backups for the most part. Browns had Case Keenum, the quarterback. They controlled the game too, and they gave the Bengals shots near the end and almost still lost, but they won. I would have picked them to win this game just knowing the Bengals weren't playing starters. And they pulled off the victory. Still a losing season. Very talented team, and they just disappointing season. I would hope for them. I think they need to add like a passing coordinator. Their passing attack and their plays and what they're trying to do is just doesn't make a lot of sense with their personnel and what they're trying to do. Like their run game, no complaints. Defensively, they're very simple, but they're very talented. You can get away with that for the most part. I think Joe Woods, he's going to be the defensive coordinator probably. So you would hope maybe they change it up a bit more. But if they're going to do that, they need more from their passing game. Baker Mayfield, if he comes back and he's healthy, that should help anyway. Maybe they can get a receiver or something, which I will expect they would. I don't think they're going to go with Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rashad Higgins, and guys like that next year. Anthony Schwartz. Again, Bengals will be playing the Raiders coming up. So that'll be, I think, the first game on Saturday. Moving on, we got the Packers and Lions. Packers played a good amount of starters for the the first half, first 28 minutes, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And then I will say they did a David Bakhtiari return. They did have Josh Myers return. That really helps the offensive line. And they look great pass protecting in this game. Could be another factor is the Lions don't really have a great pass rush, but they covered pretty well. And ultimately, the Lions pulling off a lot of trick plays. They had the lead going into half, kind of like the first matchup in week 2. But then coming out of the second half, Packers starters, most of them on defense were still out. They got a 3 now, and then it was mostly backups for the rest of the game for Green Bay. Ultimately, it came down to the very end. Jordan Love had 2 interceptions at the end of the game, which ultimately sealed the deal. The second one was more on him. The first one really wasn't. It was a contested pass that was tipped and intercepted. Moving on. Again, Packers number 1 seed. Lions, if they lost the game, they would have probably had the number 1. They would have had the number 1 pick with Jacksonville's win. But number 2, good spot for them. A lot of positive things moving forward. So a lot to improve on that team. And they have to find their quarterback, obviously. I don't know if that's going to be this year, but it could be next year. Either way, moving on, the Titans and the Texans. Titans were dominated. It was like 21-0 at halftime, and then Texans kind of rallied back. Ultimately, the Titans, with the 4th touchdown pass from Ryan Tannehill, took the lead, and they held on for the victory, which clinches the number 1 seed for them. Derrick Henry's probably going to return, which I didn't say for Green Bay. They're going to have Jair Alexander return most likely, Darius Smith, Randall Cobb, Marcos Alexander-Scanlon was the only injury I can think of from that game. Back injuries. This is the second time he's had his back injury. This year he had a hamstring earlier as well. So altogether, these teams are getting healthier. The Titans actually, I think, had an NFL record for 58 different starters this year. And they're the number 1 seed. Green Bay had a lot of injuries, so they're number 1. So, those 2 franchises, a lot of depth, and they still find ways to win. Texans, for being, most people consider the worst team, they ultimately didn't become the worst team. 4-win season. David Mills, he looked like a capable backup quarterback. Out of all the rookies, he might have even played the best for like the longest part of the season. Obviously, at the end, Zach Wilson played pretty well, and some of the stats didn't really show it. Mac Jones had a pretty good year, but I think Davis Mills, if you had to pick, he had the least around him. He had the least pressure as well, probably. But in terms of, the media, and then there's not a lot expected from the Texans, at least for New England. There was some expectations. And so I'll say on this the next game, the Colts-Jags game, even if you weren't a Colts fan, it's had to be sick to just no, you kind of blow the last week game not playing great, and now the Raiders outplay you. And you play Jacksonville, another team you haven't beat in like 8 years in their place, and you allow it to happen again. Again, the Jags lost 50-10 last week against New England, and the Colts beat New England. I know it doesn't really matter; it's matchups. For the last matchup, it was close, but ultimately, I don't know who you blame the most. It was a little bit Carson Wentz. It was a little bit Frank Wright. Just like the start and the end of the season for the Colts. Can't start off like that. Can't end the way you did. And you could say they don't deserve the playoffs after this kind of loss. And they won't, be going there. I know they also have the Hard Knock series, so that would be interesting. People, who watch that show, how that you get to see inside how that they all felt after that game. Very disappointing ending for the Colts. I really like that team. Not necessarily everything about their team, but I thought they were good enough to make the playoffs. And 2 games they should have won. They were the better team. and they got outplayed in both games. It's as simple as that. Moving on, we got the obviously Jaguars number one pick, I will say, and they'll obviously be looking for a coach. We got the Bears and Vikings. Pretty much meaningless game here, but Bears started off pretty good, and then the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, play well down the stretch. Ultimately, they win. Both teams fire their GM and head coach, so a lot of changes going on with those two franchises. Moving on to another game. I mean, most people just can think about this game as the quarterback sneak in the second quarter, I believe, 3-0, and it was 3rd and 9. There was a second 11 quarterback sneak as well. Don't want to go too much into this, but I can kind of get the second 11 quarterback sneak. The 3rd and 9, it's like I don't know what the plan or what the purpose was, other than maybe he didn't trust the quarterback. But it's not like this game matters too much. You would like to, I don't know, like if people you block the punt was blocked. Do people really care that much? Like your season's over. Like, I don't know. Not a huge fan of that call. I know most people really were against that call. There are certain situations, maybe on a 3rd and 9 you do it, but you're at the 4-yard line. It's not like I'd rather you ran the ball. I know your fans are probably still boo, but if you run the ball, at least that makes some sense. Maybe you have a chance to get in the first down. Moving on, Cardinals Seahawks. Don't know what to say about the Cardinals. You only won one game the last month or so, and they played some good teams. I know Seattle's record is a little misleading because of the Russell Wilson injury. They've been better, especially the last 2 weeks. Yeah, they simply outplayed Seattle. I mean, Arizona, and Rashad Penny's looking good. He's going to be a free agent. Very interesting what's going to go on. He has a first-round pick. It's weird that the Seahawks invested so much into him, and then it took almost 3.5 years to finally realize this guy can play. It's a little crazy. I know that Chris Carson, Adrian Peterson's still on that roster. I guess there's the guy with a touchdown. He got the 10th, tied for 10th all the time, and then they haven't used him. I think this is probably the end of him and Adrian Peterson's career, unfortunately. Obviously, not the biggest story right now, but this is interesting how that played out for the Seahawks in that signing. Moving on, well, Arizona again, they will go to the Los Angeles Rams. If they won this game, they would have won the division since 49ers won against the Rams, which we'll talk about. So just don't know how to feel about Arizona. I feel like they're just not explosive right now. A lot of screens, and I don't think you can screen your way to wins in the playoffs. So I don't know James Conner status. I don't think they're going to have Hopkins. They'll probably have J.J. Watt back. So I'm sure they'll get some help. I don't know if it's going to change a lot for Arizona. Obviously, they had a chance against the Rams when they first played, so they got another game against them. It's not the worst matchup for them. Even Dallas, they had Dallas, they beat them, obviously. So it's not the worst matchups going into the playoffs for Arizona they could have had. Moving on, Saints, Falcons. Other than the Saints' defense dominated. Taysom Hill got hurt. They won, so they were alive for the playoffs, but ultimately didn't get the help they needed. Taysom Hill's probably gonna be out and probably until August of the next season. Maybe he'll get healthy right before the season. Saints are gonna have to wonder: do they keep Jameis Winston? Taysom Hill's probably not gonna be ready. Do they sign a quarterback? We don't. Who knows? Again, Atlanta season's over, 7-10. I would say that if I had been surprised if they won 7 games, and that's ultimately what happened for the Falcons. So, good start for them. I think their schedule kind of was favorable, but could have a lot of things to improve. I think they're going to probably keep Matt Ryan on, honestly. So I would hope they improve the offensive line, maybe add another receiver. Defensively, they got a lot to improve. Maybe they can get another corner on the other side, AJ Terrell. Again, all these questions and concerns we can go over later after the season. Next game, the Jets and the Bills. This was a close game for the most part. I think it was just close because obviously it was low scoring, but Bills dominated the game. So it was the lowest thing. It was just lower scoring game, and Bills still dominated the game. But they made the Jets. They kept the Jets in the game. I think they had 9 sacks of Zach Wilson. So and Zach Wilson, I thought he played fairly well. He just didn't have a lot of help. So Bills will play New England in the wild card round. The third game between those teams should be interesting since they split the series. 49ers and Rams. 49ers came back down 17-0 at half. Sorry, not 17-0. They got a field goal right before half, 17-3. And this is the first time Sean McVay has lost a lead after leading at halftime in his career. So, strange game. 49ers looked like the better team. They just kind of intensity and looked like the Rams were just fired up for this game. Got the hot start, and then defensively, 49ers kind of dominated the game. Offensive line for the Rams could not protect Stafford. Stafford made a few mistakes. The 49ers, Garoppolo, the run game, came back and went to overtime, got a field goal, and then Matthew Stafford underthrew a pass and was intercepted. Just more and more questions for Stafford. You think all this talent around him, he'll look even better, but I believe he was a better quarterback with Detroit, even with you had more excuses for him. Like now, maybe it's the offensive line, maybe he's injured. I don't know what the case is. Maybe it's expectations. I don't really know. So again, Rams will play the Cardinals hosting them. 49ers will go to Dallas. So one rematch, one isn't. Pretty excited actually for the 49ers Dallas game. Moving on, Patriots Dolphins. Dolphins controlled this game, and New England's gonna come out with a loss going into the playoffs against the Bills. Had a chance if the Bills lost, which didn't happen, to get the number 1 seed. To get the win the division if they won, but did not happen. Miami now wins 8 of 9 games down the stretch, and still they fire their coach. I know that was because of probably the relationship between Chris Greer and Brian Flores. I hope Brian Flores gets another job. I really liked what he's done. First season with probably the worst team in the league. Everyone's talking about the Miami Dolphins tanking for Tua, all that stuff going on. That they had a very slow start, very bad early on. First 2 games got dominated by the Ravens and Patriots that year. And then they went 5-4 down the stretch, which was better in New England, if you remember, who had Brady at the time. Went 4-5 down the stretch. So Miami 2-0 in the series this year, but they have that season above expectation. They win 6 games or whatever. Next year 10-6, missed the playoffs. And then this year, obviously the terrible start, which you could blame that sometimes on the owner. I don't know if it's the Deshaun Watson thing lingering on the team that affected them, but I don't think 9-8 and 10-6 is bad for that team. Chris Greer hasn't drafted the best players. Maybe Brian Flores wanted some of those players. I don't know, but if you look at their team, they don't got superstars on that team. Maybe their corners, their secondary is really good. I give them that. They got a lot of role players and guys that are versatile. which allows them to do a lot of different stuff. That's why the defense is so good. But moving on, we'll talk about that team, the Dolphins, later. Obviously, the Patriots in the playoffs. Disappointing. They had disappointing start to the season, disappointing ending. New England, they haven't played their best football. They were hot at one point, but winning like 7 straight, but not anymore. Moving on, this game was actually a close game. It was 10-7 Buccaneers at half. And then the fourth quarter came, and it was complete domination by the Bucs. Panthers, again, they just have a hard time getting even 17 points. They got it to this game, but Darnold looked a little bit better than what we've seen from the other quarterbacks on the team, but ultimately it wasn't enough. They're keeping Matt Rule, which I don't really disagree with, but they need to find offensive coordinator. This is one of the worst offensive schemes I've seen in the league. Teams know what's coming. They can predict the play when they line up, and the defense knows where they want to throw the ball. It really makes them have a hard time throwing it. And without McCaffrey in the run game and coming out of the backfield, they just couldn't do much this year on offense. The last game, one of the best games of the year, if not the best, Chargers Raiders. This game. I mean, obviously, you can't explain what exactly happened in 10 minutes, but we'll say Justin Herbert looked great. I'll talk about some of the big things noted in this game, like the controversial 4th down and 1 at their own 18 the Chargers went for and didn't get. Honestly, when I expected the Chargers to go for it, you've watched them all year. I know that even though that was a stretch at the 18, just had a feeling they were probably going to go for it. Didn't get it. And I don't even blame that it was a run call, but again, the strength is not the Chargers' run game on offense or on defense. So try to rely on that, didn't work. Eventually, later in the game, they relied on Justin Herbert, needing to convert like 6 4th downs on 2 drives. And they were all like 4th and 10, 4th and 21, 4th and 11. And Herbert did a great job laying a 15-point comeback, tying it up. Raiders-wise, Josh Jacobs had a good day. Shard had a long 23-yard run on a 3rd and 23, whatever it was, 3rd and 21, I don't remember. But again, disappointing that the Chargers season ends. I like them as a team. They know they had weaknesses. Raiders, good story. I don't really have much faith in them. I know they've been competitive. I know they won a lot of overtime games and close fourth quarter games this year. So, again, they're in the playoffs. That's all that matters for the Raiders. This game almost came out in the tie, which would have put them both in the playoffs. I know we had that scenario. But the reason it didn't is on a 3rd and 4, after timeout. I know people question the timeout. I'm okay with the timeout. Probably wouldn't have called it, but I'm still okay with it. And the Chargers' weakness is the run defense. They couldn't stop a 3rd and 4 run. They know it was probably coming. And it was a dive play, basically. And it got like 9 yards, put the Raiders in field goal range, and ended the Chargers' season. That's all really to say about this game. Chargers made mistakes, and it put the Raiders up ahead, and they capitalized on some of the mistakes the Chargers made. It's as simple as that. Before we end this video, let's talk about some of the news. Obviously, there's a lot of news going on. Guess Black Monday in the NFL. Unfortunate Darius Philon, who actually had a pretty good game for the Raiders. His season's over. It was very late in the game he got hurt. Looks like there's some GMs the Giants are looking at. Obviously, we'll talk about when they actually do finalize on the GM, because that will decide who's the coach too. Is it Joe Judge, or is they moving on from him? Broncos request interviews with Eric Bieniemy, Dan Quinn, and others. I'm not a huge fan of signing a coach in your division because you would think Andy Reid knows all the tricks to Eric Bieniemy since he's taught him a lot probably. So to be basically going to be facing each other twice a year, if that was the case, if we did hire him. But again, he should be hired by some team. He's been, hot commodity and just hasn't got his chance to be a coach. Dan Quinn obviously has been a coach. Get some other names in there, obviously. Dolphins request Brian Dable. I'm not a huge fan of his offense, especially you've seen this year. They rely a lot on Josh Allen, and I just don't think they're too creative what they do, and it's like a modern offense. It's just I don't know, it's just average to me. So yeah, I mean, again, that's another coach in the division possibly getting hired. Bears have requested interviews with Leslie Frazier and Brian Dable. Frazier was a former Bears player. If they hired him, I wouldn't disagree with that. He's been a head coach and really get a good shot because he's Christian Ponder, quarterback. It's hard to win consistently when your quarterback's one of the worst in the league. Nothing against Ponder, it's just what he was. First round pick, invested in, and wasn't great. So more GM hire requests for the Bears. Broncos request some. We already kind of talked about that. Looks like they requested interviews with Jonathan Gannon from the Eagles. Be surprised if he got a head coaching job, but not that he's bad. It's been 1 year really with the Eagles. He has some Colts experience, but Aaron Glenn, I wouldn't think he probably should get hired. Former player, runs pretty much the same type of defense in Detroit. One season Detroit on a bad team, Obviously, it doesn't really matter what we had coaches like Matt LaFleur, one of the worst offenses in the league, and it has worked in Green Bay. Obviously, there's other circumstances around that, but just like Detroit, not the greatest defense, but kind of like what they're trying to do. And Aaron Glenn, I could see him being a good coach. Got some minor signings and releases. I don't really see anything big there. I mean, Ben Brain did play a little bit for the Packers against the Browns a couple weeks ago. Tanner Hudson's a okay third or fourth tight end, but other than that, for the 49ers, not much. More minor transactions. Zach Kerr was waived. Injured reserve for Sega Whiteside, Tyree Jackson, Brett Toth. So, yes, they signed Jason Allen. I guess they liked what they saw from his game against the Cowboys. I have a reserve contract going on. I'm going to slowly go through those. If you want to pause the video, go ahead. See some of those. We're declaring for the draft. Anthony Lynn, we're parting ways. Obviously, they took away play calling duties from him. Not a good look, didn't do well with the Chargers. I mean, he had one. Yeah, I guess it wasn't too bad, honestly. You look back at the record and stuff, but didn't have a great offense. And then, former player running back, very conservative, and at least from most people's perspective. And Detroit didn't work out well. Obviously, not a lot to work well with that team with the players they have. But Dan Campbell has done a better job with what. And then one more thing that isn't Detroit related, we got Panthers signing PJ Walker. Dave Gettleman retires. Again, draft order. We don't need Brian Flores fired. We talked about Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace fired. Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer fired. And we will go discuss these matchups coming up. Remember, Saturday we got the Raiders going to Cincinnati. Again, I think it's been like almost 19 years since the Raiders they won playoff game in that span since that Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. Uh, and then you have the Bengals who haven't won a playoff game since in 31 years or something like that. So something's due to happen with what those teams. Either the Raiders are going to win a playoff game finally, or the Bengals will. We got the Patriots going to Buffalo. This is the Saturday night game. I don't love to keep seeing rematches, especially ones we've kind of seen recently. But those are two good teams, so it should be exciting either way. Sunday, we got the Eagles going to Tampa Bay. Obviously, Tampa Bay is going to be heavy favorites. They're not playing their best football recently, and the Eagles are playing better. No, they're playing pretty close to their best football. They've had some slow starts, but again, Buccaneers should win the game. That's all I'm saying. Don't really want to do picks right now, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to pick the Bucs for that game. 49ers at Dallas for the 4 o'clock game on Sunday. That's not a rematch. We finally have a game that isn't a rematch because the Bengals and Raiders game is also a rematch. Another rematch, Kansas City hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football. Again, we just seen that. Kansas City dominated that first matchup. And another rematch, the Cardinals playing the rival Rams in Los Angeles. 8 o'clock Monday night. First time we're going to have a Monday night postseason game, I believe. At least in a while. Again, thanks for watching and listening. It was a long video. Again, enjoy the week. Hopefully have some good playoff games. I'll do some picks and what I think is going to happen on probably Friday. Again, have a good day, guys.